I'm Shahar Azani, and welcome to this episode of Eye on Israel. Israel's fight in the field of public opinion is a continuous and arduous battle. In today's reality, this anti-Zionism is the modern manifestation of what we've always been used to as the classic anti-Semitism. This time, positioning the state of Israel as the Jew among the nations. In this battle, Israelis and Jews are fortunately not fighting alone. Such friends can be found in the Philos Project, an organization whose mission is, in their own words, promoting positive Christian engagement in the Near East by creating leaders, building community, and taking, listen to this, action in the spirit of the Hebraic tradition. Today I am joined by two wonderful friends, pillars of the Philos movement. Luke Moon is the Deputy Director of the Philos Project. Prior to that, Luke served as business manager for the Institute of Religion and Democracy, and before that, as a missionary with youth with a mission for 12 years. Luke has lived, worked, and taught in over 45 countries. He has advocated on various human rights issues along the way. He holds a BA in Biblical Studies from the University of the Nations and an MA in Global Politics from Regent University. Luke is also an ordained Southern Baptist minister. Hannah Johnson-Garces is the Advocacy Associate for the Philos Project. Born, raised, and based in New Jersey, Hannah holds a BA in History and Jewish Studies from Rutgers University, as well as an MA in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Since her first trip to Israel in college, a piece of her heart remains in our beloved Promised Land. It's that passion that drives Hannah, and I can attest to it in person, in standing up for Israel and against anti-Semitism. Prior to joining the team at the Philos Project, Hannah worked in the Israel advocacy space with Stand With Us for 6 years and has been a great friend ever since. Hannah, Luke, such a pleasure to have you with us today, right here at the JBS Studios in Times Square.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thanks for having us.
So I think just based on the intro, our viewers already get a glimpse into you. But I think the question each and every one of them is asking is, who are you? What kind of people find themselves in this position? You know, Christians who stand the line for justice with the Jewish people. Maybe a little bit about your background and what made you into who you are today. Luke, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew any Jewish person until maybe like 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. I grew up in Seattle. If I knew there were friends were Jewish, I didn't know. I mean, they didn't keep kosher, they didn't wear kippahs or anything. And then I lived and worked all over the world.
Right.
And
45 countries.
It's actually now up to like 56. So it's,
wow.
Yeah, so I need to update my bio there. But it's really it was actually going to Washington, D.C. that I met Jews, became friends with Jews.
So what happens? At what point did the pendulum swing? When did you first got to meet Jews and engage on these issues?
Well, I think I'm not unlike a bunch of other Christians. You don't meet Jews because they don't live in the Acela corridor, right. Or Miami or LA, whatever. But there's also, you're not familiar with Israel. Israel's way over there. Like you read about it in your Bible, but it's not really central to anything you're doing. Right. I tended to find people who really got into the Israel issue. They were a little weird. I was like, I don't want to touch that much. And so I just was involved in other stuff, right? Like there's a lot of issues in the world. I mean, I fought human trafficking for 5 years, right? And so that didn't bring me in touch with in the Israel space very much. It was mostly in Asia and then in Europe and Africa. So it just was, I didn't really have any connection. I wasn't looking for a connection. I mean, if you had asked me, 15 years ago, would I be doing what I'm doing? No, I would have laughed at you. But it was actually, there was a group that in DC that I was kind of following what they were saying. It was, I called them the Christian left at the time. And they were going to a lot of conferences where they would speak, and they were all going to a conference. The leaders of that movement were kind of going to a conference in Bethlehem. And I thought, well, if I should follow them to Bethlehem. And so if they're going to be in Bethlehem, I should spend maybe I should spend a week in Israel proper, just to get the other side. Since I figured I was going to get a heavy dose of the Palestinian narrative, I thought, well, let me see. So
the conference in Bethlehem, was it a political conference?
Yeah, well, I would say it was a anti-Christian Zionist conference. It's called Christ at the Checkpoint. It's this was 2012 was when I went.
This is something that a lot of viewers, not just Jewish and pro-Israel, but general community are not aware of, the efforts that are being made to pull Christians away from the support for Israel. And here you are, attracted by that movement, but moving in a different direction. So how did that work? You went to Bethlehem?
So I did, but I did want to go to Israel first. Right?
Before the conference.
I thought, I just need to, I'm suspicious generally of like propaganda and narratives. Everybody has them, but I want to hear firsthand. I want to meet people and hear their story and tell me why you do what you do and why are you here. And so I sent an email to everybody I knew. I went to my entire inbox and I said, I'm going to Israel. I want to meet your friends. I had 2 people respond. That was like, I made that lunch and coffee on the first day I was there. And then I said I would have a meal and I would say, well, who else should I meet? And she said, oh, you should really meet this person, Luke. And I said, well, can you introduce me? So they'd pick up the phone, it was back before the iPhone even. Right. And they would be like, introduce me. And so that would be my next coffee, or I'd have dinner, or I'd go and meet. And I just drove up and down the country of Israel, meeting people and hearing their story. And it was really quite different than I think what I expected to find. And then I basically did the same thing on the Palestinian side.
So you went, then you go to the conference in Bethlehem.
I did. And I remember sitting with a Palestinian peace activist, and I said, what do you want? And he said, well, I want peace. And I was like, so does Miss America. That's not an answer. Everybody wants peace, right? And I said, paint me the picture of peace. And he couldn't paint the picture of peace with any Jews in it. And I was like, well, that's not peace. That's the cessation of violence because the people you're fighting against don't exist anymore. That's not peace, right? And so I tried to paint the picture. And every time he was like, no, I can't do that. No, I can't do that. I was like, well, listen, what am I supposed to do here? Like, you want me to advocate on behalf of Palestinians, Palestinian Christians, but the narrative that you offer is only, hey, we're here, we're over here. And it's not like, they're not advocates of peace. They talk, but they're not doing the work. And they have no vision for what it could look like. And that was a real problem for me. And so I came back from that conference. I wrote an article on my experience. It did really well. And it led to more and more articles, more and more relations. They were not happy at all.
But you know what's amazing about your story, Luke? And I'm sure all of our viewers pay attention. Here you are, somebody who is, mature, very well rooted in the world. You know what you want to do.
Yeah.
You're already working to do good things around.
Right.
Missions all over to help people. You mentioned human trafficking.
Yeah.
And there is nothing more inspirational, really, on a national level, to receive just such an endorsement from someone like you, who ventures into the Israel realm, gets invited to that, to that side, and then dives deep.
Yeah.
Nobody could sell you, the empty packages of Let's Talk Peace. It reminds me, one of our frequent guests is an Israeli expert by the name of Dr. Mordecai Kedar, if you know him.
I love him.
So Kedar said, he told the story, I don't know if you know, that he used to be a lefty and a peace activist, and he learned Arabic. And one day in the mid-90s, he went with a delegation of Israeli peace organizations to meet with Yasser Arafat in Judea and Samaria at his office. And as they're sitting there, Nabila Borodina, who was Arafat's assistant and advisor, was sitting with them, and Arafat asked him in Arabic, what should I say? Yeah. And Nabila Borodina said, this is how Kedar testifies how he transitioned in his political position. He said, Nabila Borodina said, in Arabic, tell them the usual garbage. And that's where, kind of like, okay, he started thinking about what it is that we're facing. And that's amazing. So I want to ask you, what kind of responses you got for that article from the, a Christ at the Checkpoint, from those people who invited you?
Well, yeah, because I was coming, I actually happened to know a good number of people who were involved in Christ at the Checkpoint, because the mission organization I was involved in had some people there was a guy there who had done a film that did quite well among Christians in turning them against Christian Zionism, and it was called With God on Our Side. And that film, the guy that produced that, him and I became friends, still friends to this day, but he was very much involved in that circle. So, I got invited behind the scenes to go to all the dinners and stuff like that. And so, but when I came out, pretty publicly against what they were trying to do.
How did he respond?
He was not happy, obviously. He was like, Luke, why'd you do it? Why'd you do that like that? I'm like, well, because that's what I saw.
But you're also a very thinking person. Like, you went there and you asked that Palestinian activist, what do you want?
Yeah.
And not the Miss America answer, but what do you really want?
Right.
So the engagement was intelligent. It wasn't just based on emotion. So wasn't he interested in what turned you? Because you come from a very logical point of view.
Yeah, but I don't think I was, even then, I wasn't where I am now, right? I mean, It's because now I know a whole lot more. I mean, that was the first time I had gone to Israel, and the first time I had gone to the Palestinian territories. And at the time, I mean, this is 10 years ago, the Palestinian Christian kind of story and movement was gaining a lot of traction in the American Christian church. And it has since waned a lot, actually. I can talk about that. But in terms of, at the time, it was like an ascendant movement. And I didn't know. I mean, I would, at the time, when somebody asked me, are you a Christian Zionist? I would say, well, no, I'm a Christian who's a Zionist, right? Because I didn't want to be associated with those Christian Zionists, like the crazy ones everybody has in their head, right? And I wanted to be like the nice kind, right? and since then, I've basically if somebody asks me now, I'm a Christian Zionist. Like But
you are a man on a mission.
I am of course.
And the mission goes, Israel is part of the mission, but there's a grand mission of making this world a better place that is woven into your personality.
Yeah, no, I tend to go to the places that are hard and do the things that are. I mean, I did reconciliation work in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and the Balkans, and Nigeria, and I tell you what, like the Israel-Palestinian conflict blows all those conflicts. It is so complicated. There is not like with some of the other conflicts, you can point to, there's some historic things, or there's some like kind of cultural like pieces here and there, but it's not as all-encompassing and so tied up in layer after layer of complexity. And I think that's hard for people. I mean, people want to say like, I'm pro-peace, I'm pro-Israel, pro-Palestine, pro-peace, pro-Jesus, and I would say pro-unicorn. Like, if it fits on a bumper sticker, you're not helpful. Really, you're not. If
it fits on a bumper sticker, you're not helpful. I love this. That's beautiful.
It's because it's so complicated. It really is.
Yeah, we are fighting the simplicities.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Hannah, I want to just ask you, we've known for years, and I have to tell you that from the very first moment I met you, my thinking was, wow, she's not Jewish and she loves Israel so much. That's amazing. So how does that happen for you?
Yeah, thank you, Shahar. So my story, I think I divide into two categories. One, it's meeting the Jewish people, the faith, the community, and then meeting the state of Israel. So growing up, I grew up in New Jersey, born and raised. A bunch of my dear friends were Jewish, and that was my first exposure into the culture, the faith, bat mitzvahs, all of that. And then I found out that my best friend's grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. And it was a pivotal moment. I didn't get it. She was the most loving, bubbly human you've ever met. But she went through the worst that we've seen in human history. So I made it a mission to go and find all I could about this. How could we, as a people in the modern century, let this happen? Because someone is of a certain faith. It didn't correlate. So from there, I was able to get a job at my local community college and high school at the Holocaust and Research Center. And I just needed to learn more because I said, this can never happen again, at least on my watch. So that was my first exposure.
You know, a lot of young people don't react the way you do. It's like they let these things just fly by them and pass by them. And yet you showed such a level of caring where you said, I'm looking at this, I have to do something about this. What is it about you that made you do it? Like, I'm sure a lot of parents are looking at this and saying, how can I get my kid to be like Hannah?
So I think it's my faith. My family, we were raised in a very strong household, Christ at the center, and everything comes from that. And so how can you look at a world where someone could do this to another person and not look for the justice in it? And where all those questions came after that. So it just really hit me right in the gut, in the heart. And I went like head first. I was that crazy, nerdy kid in the library. Every book you could on the Holocaust and research, I had it as a 12-year-old, which is wild. And
that led you to what you studied on?
Yeah, so I was gonna go to school at Rutgers for Holocaust and genocide education. I wanted to educate people to make sure genocides wouldn't happen again. And then I got to campus, and my Jewish friends there told me about Israel. So I knew about Israel from the Bible. You know, we talk about it at church. You support the Jewish people. I knew that, but that was it. Baseline knowledge. So my Jewish friends were telling me about what's happening real time in Israel on the ground, and how, as the Jewish community, they were being attacked for their connection to Israel. So again, truth seeker that I am, I need to know, I need to find out. So I went to Israel. And I fell in love. And I saw what was happening on the ground and how it didn't make sense what was being said on my campus. And so I came back with more fire. So I pivoted. I said, okay, I can do this studies too, but the Israel is the right now issue. So I came back. I started the first Christian group on campus to support Israel. That was an uphill battle in and of itself at Rutgers University. I love my school dearly, but it was a huge problem. And then fast forward, Why
was it a problem? How was it a problem?
So when I was in school, which was a while back now, there were a lot of anti-Israel professors in the Middle Eastern Studies program that were saying a lot of things. The administration put up a lot of red tape when I tried to make a group on campus for Israel. Because I was Christian, they said, oh, no, there's already pro-Israel groups on campus. There's Hillel, there's Chabad. I said, no, mine is different. And they blocked us initially. So it was, like I said, an uphill battle. My friends at Hillel actually were the ones that helped me get the group to go forward. So I really, really have such a dear space in my heart for them.
So you are both, listening to you, Luke, and to you, Hannah, there is such a strong element of personality and faith, and really a sense of direction and vocation, as some sort of a light that guides you forward. And that the fact that light brought you unto Israel is a huge message of endorsement for everybody out there who's listening and asking themselves, in a world filled with doubts, when people whisper in your ear, this is not the Israel that you want. You are real people who don't come from any intense Jewish background. You did your own digging, for all of your life that you've been engaged in fighting for justice. That in and of itself is one of the greatest messages that can come out of this conversation. But then, you go through life, and here we are reaching the Philos Project. How did that happen?
Well, a couple years after that first conference, it was 2014, I had been told to be on the lookout for a guy named Robert Nicholson. He was doing a project to kind of look at the Christian Zionist space, what was going on there, and he was attending the conference. And he was also told to look out for me. We met each other at the Christ at the Checkpoint conference.
At the Christ at the Checkpoint. And you know what? I've always thought to myself, that conference, no good is going to come out of it. I am so happy to be proven wrong.
But the thing so Robert and I had, and still do, we just like to go to the places where you're not supposed to go and talk to the people you're not supposed to talk to, because I find those conversations very interesting.
Yes.
They can be very entertaining.
Right.
They, like if you're already in agreement, the conversations, you're talking about things you agree on, right? But if you're not, like, the conversation goes in a different direction, and often one that you don't always expect. And so Robert and I found that we had this really natural kind of tag team thing that we could do, that he would say something and you know, he would lean in with a question, and then I would lean in. Like, we worked really well together, and we both like to go and have those kind of interesting, hard conversations, right? There was a lot of people who want to avoid, you know, talking about settlements or talking about, you know, the wall or something like that. Robert and I, we want to go have that conversation first. Like, we're just drawn to that, like those hard questions. And so, you know, I had not met somebody who liked that like I did, and so we just hit it off. And a few months later, I was being approached to work for another Christian pro-Israel organization, and Robert called me. He's like, I'm about to start my own thing. I'd love to have you on board. And I was like, I don't want to move to New York. And he's like, well, it's, you know, there's trees up here. I was like, I don't believe you. But I came up, and it turned out there are trees. And so he convinced me to come and help him launch the Philos Project.
Look, I got to ask you, you know, there are so many good causes out there.
Yes.
And you're a man with a mission to make a difference and change people's lives for the better. I understand you engage with the Israeli issue, the Middle East, you see the certain injustice, you get riled up. But at the end of the day, you also made a choice to focus your efforts in this arena. Why focus? Like, you can care, but just move on. And yet you didn't. You decide you're going to focus on this issue. What made you do that?
I don't know, Shahar. I don't know. Because, like, I don't think I would have picked it. I mean, I did, like I said, I fought human trafficking for like 5 years. When I started fight on the anti-trafficking work, there was, like, I think 13 states had laws against trafficking.
Right.
By 2010, all 50 states had laws. There was a lot of work internationally. It was like, it was a movement. And you know, to this day, when I bring it up, man, people are patting me on the back. "Little Luke, you're so amazing. I can't believe you did that. It's such good work." It's like, yeah. Well, it turns out I found there's like 3 issues that everybody will pat you on the back for, right? It's like anti-trafficking, you know, child soldiers, malaria and tuberculosis or something. Everybody loves to fight those things. Israel? No.
Luke, you are amazing. I love the fact that you're doing this. Like, to be honest, it blows my mind that you chose this and us.
Kind of blows my mind too, man. It kind of blows my mind.
And also, I want to mention, I spoke recently with Robert on his podcast, and, you know, just speaking with you and speaking with him, it's incredible the level of knowledge that you guys possess and the depth you go into. You're talking about shying away from the issues. I mean, I spoke with Robert, and I'm speaking with you on issues that so many within the community are not familiar with. So that is very special.
No, I agree, and I don't quite know why. I mean, I chalk it up to providence. I believe that, you know, in those 12 years of missionary work, you know, if I felt God was saying go somewhere, I'd go somewhere. Like, I literally that was my path. And so, you know, I just feel like this is a calling. This is a calling for a very important moment. And I think there's something special going on with the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and I want to be a part of that. So
you say yes. You say yes to the trees, and
yes.
You start the Philos Project.
Well, with Robert.
And when what happens? Like, how do you decide what you want to focus on, what you want to do? Like, what do you do? What was your vision when you created this?
Well, we really recognized that a lot of the language out there was very bombastic. It's very intense. It's almost hyper political. It tends to put Israel in, like, you know, it's like it's in the gated community of Western Europe as opposed to the, you know, troubled neighborhood of the Middle East. Right. And so even, you know, back when we had a blog on our first website. You know, those are back, but for a while they were really cool. Everybody loved them. And we were intentional about making sure the Israel conversation was in the midst of what was happening in the region. So if we had 3 articles, 2 would be about something going on in the region and 1 would be about Israel. And the idea was to like really address where Israel's located. We were very intentional about making sure people want to put you in a box. Either you love the Jew and hate the Arab, or you love the Arab and hate the Jew.
Right.
And to this day, you really have, at least in the Christian circles, you really have to fight against that, because the natural pull is to expect that you not like purely pick a side, like as in terms of like love and hate, as opposed to, love and recognize the humanity of kind of thing, right? Like that kind of expectation. And so it was very much recognized that tone matters, how you talk about this matters, what you say matters. I mean, I remember, I ended up, because I'm Christian, I would go to church when I moved to New York. And I met my pastor, and he says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I raise awareness about Christian persecution in the Middle East and encourage Christian support for Israel." And I would say it in that direction, because if I said the first thing, the second thing I could get through. But if I had started with, I encourage Christian support for Israel, it would have shut off the conversation, which is really interesting in and of itself. And his question to me is, well, what about the Palestinians? And I said, well, what about the Palestinians? I said, are you aware that it's illegal to convert from Islam to Christianity in Palestinian territories? That if you write a Facebook post against the president, you'll go to jail, and that the Palestinian leadership has said the future Palestinian state will be free of Jews, which is what the Nazis wanted. So I'm going to advocate for the Palestinians on the basis of justice, that they would have freedom of religion, free press, and the ability of people to live and move where they want to live. And that tended to shut him up, but it tended to shut people up in general. Right. But you had the rise of ISIS at the time, so there was a lot going on in the region. Just it was kind of at that moment again in the eyes of the world, and we hit a sweet spot, I think, and the work we did took off. So
I'm thinking about the history of what brought this about, and it reminds me of an episode I was involved with when I was at the Israeli consulate working as a consul for media affairs in New York. And 60 Minutes ran a special investigative feature with Bob Simon about the persecution of Christians in the Middle East. And you were mentioning that theme, but then the focus of the show was Israel.
Right.
Persecution of Christians in the Middle East focused on Israel. And it's amazing to think that persecution of Christians in the Middle East doesn't ring a bell in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, the Palestinian territories, but then you point the finger at Israel. So maybe it was really decreed from above that those events and everything that's happening would give birth to something as amazing as Philos and the work that you guys do. Yeah. So when you were talking about Philos today, what do you do? Because Philos is a lot about, even from listening to you, there are words and then there are actions. Right. So a lot of focus on actually doing things. So share with our viewers a little bit about the things that you do.
Well, Philos is really an umbrella type organization in the way that General Electric makes everything from airplane engines to the toaster in your kitchen, right? And Philos, well, we don't make either of those things, but we have different focuses because we recognize that people tend to live and operate in silos or communities where they feel most comfortable, and so from the beginning, we recognized that, I would describe it early on like this. Imagine 100 million Christians in America, 20 million love Israel regardless, 20 million hate Israel regardless. This group in the middle, unengaged or underengaged on Israel.
I can't. I mean, these guys get it. I mean, I just can't. I'm sitting here it's like from the belly of the beast. They know exactly what the challenges are, how to address them. Even the fact, Luke, that you guys were mentioning, answering question with a question. So what about the Palestinians? What about the Palestinians? I love this.
I appreciate that. But the thing is, the makeup of that group that's in the middle, or tend to be them, the younger you are, the less white you are, and the more you run stuff within the Christian space, the less likely you are to support Israel. And so we started programming to address those issues specifically, right? So we started a thing called Passages, which brings Christian college students to Israel on a highly subsidized trip. It's basically kind of like a Christian birthright program. It's amazing. We started them. We ended up spinning them off. They're their own organization now, doing great work. They've taken almost 10,000 Christian college students to Israel now, which is amazing. Doing great work there. And we started Hispanic Affairs, which engaged the Hispanic community. Eventually we started African American Affairs, which engaged the African American community. We're doing stuff with Catholics, and we're doing stuff, I'm very interested in engaging the Asian community, because, very few organizations, Jewish or Christian, on the pro-Israel side are engaging the Asian community.
Very true.
And yet like a third of Korean Americans are Christian, right? And it's only like, hey, do you want to do business? Well, how about, hey, like this place where your faith came from is right here.
You know that in Seoul they're studying Talmud.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah, very true.
And so, we really saw ourselves as kind of trying to engage different communities. The more you run stuff, so we started bringing we call them VIP trips. So leaders, people that run stuff within the Christian space, bring them on a trip. The trips that we would run, we talked about, basically it was 2/3 people, 1/3 site. If I could get this group into the home of somebody every day, that's a win for me, right? Because it matters that you connect people to people. Because unfortunately, the rocks start looking the same after like the 5th site, and you're like, yeah, Jesus was here, woo, right? But that's it, right? It's not sticky enough to actually move people past, yeah, Jesus was here, to why do I care now, right? And getting them past the Jesus was here to where they are now is like hugely significant, right? My favorite part is all the groups we run. We take them and have a dinner in the home of an Orthodox Jewish family for Shabbat. And I tell you what, like the most incredible thing is after we sit, I've done it enough so I can sing Shahar Azani. I know all that, right? After that, though, they sing Proverbs 31 over the woman of the household. And I would say reading the Proverbs is a very common practice in Christian community. Lots of people do it, right? So suddenly everybody's like, oh, I know that, right? And then the thing that usually breaks every group is when the parents of the household lay hands on the kids and blesses them with the prayers that come from Genesis. And you're like, wow. And that just rocks everybody's. I mean, grown men cry. I cry. Well, now I'm kind of used to it, but I used to cry a lot more. But it's incredible because what it does is it smashes ancient and modern Israel together, right? It's like, the fact that these people, I'm in the home of these people in Jerusalem, in the holy city. They're singing these songs, praying these blessings that I've read about my whole life. It does something incredible. It does something incredible, and it gets under the skin of people, right? Because it's not just any longer the words on the page that I've read my whole life in black and red and white, right? But it's alive now, and it does something incredible, and it causes people to connect at a level that they wouldn't otherwise. It's really important.
Hannah, we're mentioning action, and a lot of your, when you look at Philos's, social media posting and you follow, and I'm always, it always gives me so much joy to follow the work that you guys do. The Philos Action League. Share with us a little bit about those actions and the things you do compared to so many statements, and things that people say.
Right, so the Philos Action League, we're a community of Christians around the country who will show up.
So that's under the umbrella of the Philos Project?
Yes, it's my specific project I get to work with Luke every day on, which is challenging and rewarding at the same time. Not because of you, but because of the work.
I can imagine.
So a community of Christians around the country.
There's probably a sticker, Miss America answer.
I think he needs a shirt, actually. Christmas.
Yeah.
It's a community of Christians around the country, no matter where, will show up when anti-Semitism happens in any form. So our traditional way we show is we bring a bouquet of white roses and a letter, and we just tell the Jewish community in that area, we're here, we're your friends, you're not alone. Because the hashtag activism of social media that we see, like, okay, cool, put this border around your picture, put this picture up, great, but what goes beyond that? You actually have to physically show up. That it means something. It's different to people, like Luke said, connecting people to people. If someone shows up to you personally versus, oh great, like I tweeted something. So that's what we do.
And I'm just wondering, because you're talking about actually showing up, why the roses?
Right. So when we were trying to figure out what kind of symbol we wanted to use.
I really wanted the Punisher.
Yeah, me and Luke had a great debate about it.
It's gonna be great. It's, you know.
I think I won the debate though, and we chose the white rose. Going back to kind of my study of the Holocaust, so there is a group in Germany called the White Rose. They started in 1942 by two siblings, Sophie Scholl and Hans Scholl. They were Christian students at the University of Munich, and they didn't like what they saw. They saw the rise of Nazism, they saw what they were doing to their Jewish friends and neighbors, and they said, we need to stop this. So they created a group of people like themselves. They distributed educational information to tell people what was actually happening and, implore them to stop. They lost their lives doing so because they were caught and executed. So we wanted to stand on the shoulders of those giants and continue that legacy now, because we're seeing this rise of anti-Semitism, hatred, anti-Zionism that everyone thinks is just in history books come back again. So we wanted to honor their legacy and use that.
And what kind of reactions are you receiving? So a certain synagogue was attacked, swastikas, whatever. You show up. How do you get the people to show up? It could happen in remote places, not just where there are trees. How do you... What do you do? How do you get that to happen? Like, I'm sure our viewers look at you with amazement. They're like, they actually do, but how does that happen?
So we have a person on our team who just scours the internet to find out when things happen. She contacts me, I contact the people on the ground, and I tell them, you're gonna go to this synagogue, you're gonna bring this letter, and you're gonna get these roses, and take a photo so we know that you got there.
And the reactions from Jewish community, from others?
Gratefulness, overwhelming, gratitude. Sometimes we don't get a reaction, but when we do, it's always with such gratitude that it's overflows out of them. They kind of can't believe that there are people who'd be willing to do this. And so it takes me back every time someone tells us that.
Yeah. I'm sure that as a young person today, with all of the challenges we see today with the younger generation when it comes to Israel, and as you mentioned with Rutgers, it's not an easy journey to make, but I'm focused on the word you mentioned before, which was faith. That's really is a pillar in doing the good that you continue to do. And I love the fact that there is a lot of action here, because especially in the Jewish world, we're so accustomed to, we should issue a statement. Right. We have to say something about this. Why have you waited 7 days before you uttered something? And you were like, okay, great with the statements, but we want to see a change on the ground. But I want to tap for a minute to your expertise, because we hear a lot.
But let me jump on that though. One of the things that you see in the Hebrew scripture is we're body and spirit, right? I don't see anywhere we're digital creatures, and yet we've been so focused to become digital creatures. Right. And I think what happens when we show up, physically, it actually, we recognize that God engages this world physically, right? There's a talk I always give when I'm in Israel called Matter Matters, right? Matter matters to God. He chose a city in this world to be his city. He chose a people, Jews, to be his people in this world. He could have done it all with fairy dust or whatever, but he chose to operate in time and space and with people, with bodies, with matter. And I think so showing up is what takes things to another level, especially in a world where it's all hacktivism or statements and they're just nobody cares. Honestly, nobody cares. right? And so when you get somebody, it's like, our goal was to have 10,000 members of the Philos Action League by the end of the year. We got to 2. We got to 2,000.
Wow.
But in those 2,000 showed up at over 120 responses in response to anti-Semitic incidences around the country, which is amazing and tragic at the same time. It's tragic because there was 120. Actually, there's 3 times that many. But it's amazing because it meant that we found somebody who was actually physically willing to come when we called them to go and stand in solidarity and friendship with Jewish people. And it that action piece, it's like, to me, it's what really actually makes all the difference.
Matters. I identify with everything that you guys are saying, because even to me, it seems that for activists today, it's enough to have a viral video.
Right.
Let's do a post about this. I'm going to have so many followers. Now, followers used to be people who followed. Now, followers. And that's it. And even as a diplomat, the focus for me has always been, standing up for Israel. Yes, it means speaking up and writing and doing all of that. But at the same time, it all has to translate to people coming to Israel, to tourism, to businesses, to connections, like you say, between people. Otherwise, it's not enough. But today, it seems like, that's the focus. If I get a viral video gone, I'm wonderful. This is and even the bad guys, those who try to undermine Israel, it's not enough for them to have those videos. The boycott movement seeks to undermine those cultural connections, academic connections. So your answer is a perfect fit for the question. And I urge all of you to pay very close attention. The answer and the question, action matters.
It does.
And I want to go back to, tap into your expertise. There is a lot of concern. We've seen, on the one hand, support from Christian communities. On the other hand, Christ at the Checkpoint and other attempts to somehow take away that support. Where do you see the Christian world in this regard today? Where are we at this battle for hearts and mind within the Christian communities?
Well, I would say, unfortunately, it's not positive. Right. The most recent surveys in the last 18 months on Christian support for Israel finds young Christians waning in their support. The white evangelical older people, their support for Israel is in the 82% range, which is super high for anything that's high, right? But for the young people, it's in the 60s actually, which is very problematic. Which is why we started some of the program that we've done and are particularly focused on engaging young adults, young professionals. But it's rooted in, there is a biblical illiteracy out there is on the rise. I mean, even though I can pull up the Bible on my phone, it basically has led to people actually being less biblically literate, right? They're not reading the Bible as much. And reading the Bible, there's a direct correlation between biblical literacy, reading your Bible, and support for Israel and Jewish people.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and so as that declines, it matters. Obviously, there is, the anti-Israel voices have become very adept on social media. I mean, the conflict in May of 2021, Israel won the war,
right,
but we lost social media. I mean, I think we did an internal audit of what was our response, and I was very disappointed. I gave us like a C- or a D+. I just, we responded, we posted, we did on social media, but we didn't do enough. We didn't do enough. We were not ready to.
So how are we going to be ready for next time? Because we all know next time, unfortunately, will come. What can we do, both on your end, and what would you recommend our viewers to do when it comes to being ready for the next time such a thing arises?
Well, I think one of the things has to happen is there needs to be, the Jews need relationships outside the Jewish community. And I would say even, one of the things that often happens is the anti-Semitic incidences that I hear about or we hear about the Philos Action League, the only reason we hear about it is because we're actually looking for it.
Right.
Like the reality is that as much as the Jewish people think they're expanding beyond the Jewish people, what we find out there on the street when we're asking people to sign up for the Philos Action League is that they don't know that anti-Semitism is happening. We go to conferences and we're like, sign for the Philos Action League, and they're like, what's this about? And it's like, Christians standing up in friendship and solidarity physically with the Jewish people when there's an anti-Semitic incident, and they're like, what? That's going on? So
and then you're seeing from your perspective that the level of anti-Semitism continues to rise.
It continues to rise, but it's like locally isolated. Like take there was the swastikas, and Kanye was right, that was spray painted at a Jewish cemetery in Chicago area, right? That made Chicago news, but I'm not sure it made the Seattle Times. I doubt it.
Or even if it does make. Even if it does make, like you say, people need to pay attention to it.
Right. And they don't have an outlet for it. So even if they came across it, so that's where, for us, we were able to call up one of our members in Chicago area. He brought flowers to that cemetery, and there happened to be a family there who's had a relative buried in that cemetery, and he got to meet them. And it was like, it's everything you would want to have happen in that kind of situation. Right. But it does matter that, we have these relationships so that we can actually muster a good group of people to respond. I mean, after that conflict, Shahar, I went to there was a rally an anti-Israel rally in Teaneck, New Jersey. It was done on Shabbat, intentionally so the Jewish community couldn't or wouldn't respond.
And in Teaneck.
Right? And I went, for the first 30 to 45 minutes, I was the only person there on the Israel side. I had a sign that says, I stand with Israel and Jews. And then eventually maybe like a dozen Jews showed up. I was the only non-Jew for sure, the whole time, right? That's an issue, right? That's a real problem, right? Is that, and then, a few months later, Burlington, Vermont, the city municipality had a resolution on BDS, right? And Hannah called me at like 11 o'clock, said there's a resolution in Burlington. It's going to be in the town council tonight. I Googled how long it would take me to drive from my house to Burlington, Vermont. I could be there in 5 hours, and so I waited for my wife and told her. But then I jumped in my truck and I drove up to Burlington, and again, I was the only non-Jew. It was about in the room there was about 50 Palestinian activists and about 50 Jews. I was the only non-Jew on the pro-Israel side, pro-Jewish side.
And were you able to speak?
I didn't get to speak because they had filled up the queue before I got to it. But I was like, man, if it was actually kind of the impetus for starting Philos Action League, because I was like, if I need to be able to bring more people, right? I need more of me to come with me. I need to be able to pick up the phone and get like 20 people there. I mean, how incredible would that be, Shahar? If instead of just like Luke and Hannah show up at these things, it's Luke, Hannah, and 20 other people who are not Jewish. To me, it's just like it would be incredibly powerful.
This is why this is so important, to amplify your voice, so that more and more members of not just the Jewish community but people in general realize what you do and who you are and where you come from doing it. So I want to just ask you a question that maybe sums it all up in a way that can resonate with people. Why do you think, or is it important for Christians to stand by Israel and the Jewish people, and then for people in general, but for Christians? Maybe both of you can share an answer for that, inspire the people to understand.
For me, there's a verse in the New Testament that says, the root sustains you, you don't sustain the root. And the root is referenced there as the root of Jesse. Okay, like it's that connection to the story of Israel. and I would say, and the Jewish people. And that is, there's so much theological meat there that could be unpacked, but to me, it's very simple. That there is this, my definition even of anti-Semitism is there's this irrational hatred of the Jewish people rooted in the fact that the Jews were the people by which God brought his moral revelation into this world, and the world hates for it, right? Like it's irrational, but it's deeply, there's something deeper than just like all the accusations that get thrown at Jews. It's like there's a special and irrational hatred. Right. And the degree to which Christians are hated is because we're connected to that hatred, because we're also that moral law that was given on Mount Sinai, we affirm it as well, right? And so for us, it's this very natural connection. We're cousins in the faith. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob we see them as the patriarchs. Right. And so for us, it's very strong, and we think it's important for Christians to connect at that level. And we recognize it's actually not easy. There's a lot of it's one of those issues where pastors make a risk-reward calculation on Sunday. Am I going to talk about this? And it just doesn't. It's too hot a topic, so they kind of avoid it.
Can you imagine you're saying this, and some people may look at this and think, not necessarily unlike rabbis?
Yeah, I suspect.
Hannah, what do you think? What would you say?
Yeah. So everything Luke said, and my added take is, it's just the right thing to do. The roots of my faith come from the Jewish people. How can I just stand here and watch all of this go on and not do anything about it? It goes back to my youth, my truth seeking, I see something wrong, I want to correct it. So for me, it's just instinctive.
And it goes back to the beginning of our very short conversation when you mention your background in history as people who seek justice, who want to do right by this world. And when they end up witnessing such a grave injustice, you can't just keep quiet about it. And you're not just about to issue a viral video. Right. You're just going to make a difference. And one of the, I think, the most important things I want people to take away from this conversation is, how do they get in touch with you guys? How do they keep tab of everything that you're doing and maybe assist and help and be part of this grand effort? Because it's so important to know that we're not alone.
Well, obviously we have a website because we are,
So what's the website?
It's philosproject.org, and Philos is spelled Philos, project. It means friend in Greek, actually. Right. And so, that's the idea, is friendship. Or you can just, Google Philos Action League or Philos Project. All that stuff will come up. And really, I think one of the spots that really is, for me, a very important is building relationships. I'm always looking for groups to partner with, to foster friendship with. The only reason we know there's anti-Semitism out there is because we have found organizations and people who will alert us to the fact that there's anti-Semitism. So we want to be more aware of what's going on in more places in the country so that we can respond effectively. And one of the things that I tell people is that anti-Semitism on the left is, I love Jews and hate Israel. And anti-Semitism on the right is, I love Israel and hate the Jews. Which means that I got to do a much better job for people on the right of connecting people on conservative Christians and conservatives in general with Jews, because they just, like my story is, I didn't know any until 10 years ago.
Right.
I'm pretty normal. I'm out there in the world. I think I'm, and I'm a conservative guy, and it's like, that's my world, right? And unless I, met people like you, Shahar, I would not be where I am today, nor would I be as committed as I am to this issue, to standing in solidarity and friendship with the Jewish people, if I didn't know.
The feeling and the emotion that I have in this issue is one of gratefulness. I am so thankful for you, for all that you do, and I think that I speak on behalf of so many people who love Israel, and so many Jews and non-Jews who are inspired by your not just support for Israel, but that insistence, that stubbornness to stand up for what's right and what's just in making our world a better place. I'd like to thank you for sharing your story with us and for inspiring us not just to speak, not just to post, but to do. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for
Thank
having
you.
us. It's been great.
It's been a pleasure having Hannah and Luke. What great passion and devotion for Israel, but also for standing up for justice and again for what's right in the world, and their immense contribution to Jewish-Christian relations. I think it's been an inspiration for all of us to listen to their stories, especially in these challenging days of ours, and to know that we're not alone. And to you, our viewers, I'd like to say it's a great message to take home. When you see people of different colors and creeds join hands together to stand up for what's right in this world, it's encouraging, not just for Christians and Jews, but for all of us as humanity, as human beings. And it all goes back to our recurring message. If you'd like to make a difference, roll up those sleeves and get to work. Just like Luke, Hannah, Philos Action League, and all of our other friends at Philos and beyond. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we cast another eye on Israel.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.